Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to those joining us on the live stream, which I think is up over here. My name is Mike Cerulli. I'm a political reporter for News 8. I cover the legislature. So Mr. Corey Paris is someone I'm pretty familiar with. And I figured we obviously all know who Clarissa is. We just watched a wonderful film. And let's get one more round of applause for. I'd love to give you two the opportunity to introduce yourselves to the audience tonight. Francheska, would you like to go first?
Hello. Hi, I'm Francheska Velazquez. I am from Stanford, and I own. Oh, right here. Okay. So I am Francheska Velazquez. I'm from Stanford, and I own child care centers in Connecticut. Play to learn.
I'm Corey Paris. I'm state representative representing the 145th district here in Connecticut, which encompasses Stanford's Waterside and West Side districts. Also vice chair of the Appropriations Committee, and in addition to that, a member of the Early Childhood Education Caucus. And I've spent 5 years of my life in the ECE field. I worked for one of the largest center-based programs here in the state of Connecticut, servicing nearly 1,000 families. And I left that role a couple of years ago. Mark Jaffe, who was around here not too long ago, he and I were, he was our CEO, big supporter. And so I'm really glad to be here with all y'all tonight.
Also, we're supposed to be joined tonight by State Senator Steve Harding, the Republican Senate leader. He unfortunately came down with an illness. Evan, did you want to read that statement now? He did send us a text. Wanted to send his greetings to all of you. Unfortunately, as I say, he's sick today, so he couldn't be here.
Okay. So Senator Harding said, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you Child Care for CT for their long efforts in providing long-term and sustainable solutions towards resolving the child care crisis we face in our state. It is critical to our workforce, parents, and most importantly, the children of Connecticut. I am committed to working in conjunction with these incredible advocates to find real solutions in the upcoming legislative session and beyond.
Steve, for that. Let's get into our panel discussion here. Clarissa, thank you so much for being here. We obviously all just saw a bit of your story up on screen. I wonder, are there lessons that we saw on screen that could be applicable to an environment like Connecticut, or the things, as you, I'm sure, have traveled the country up to Washington, D.C., that you like to impart on folks who are trying to make progress on this issue?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me. And I'm gonna go ahead and call you out. Representative Paris did not see the whole film. He fell asleep. So I look forward to hearing your thoughts. I'm just joking.
Just a quiz after this, by the way.
So much for nonpartisan, huh?
So
All right.
So this is for you. This answer is for you, since you didn't see the film.
Whole film.
One of the things that I love to discuss is that those that are most impacted absolutely deserve and must not only have a seat at the table, but decision-making authority and agency over their own lives. That's one. And there are structures that we can create, which I'm happy to talk about with anyone. I want to be mindful of time. Things that we created as governance structures within Measure C, that, by the way, is out of court. I'm also happy to give an update about that. But governance structures so that budget allocation, programmatic design, everything from facilities, and making sure that there's equity in the way that facilities money is distributed. All of that, folks who are either impacted by the lack of childcare or the lack of equitable wages have decision making. The second thing is bringing childcare providers and parents together. This is a particular passion of mine because there's so much intersectionality between the challenges and the opportunities. And often, because of a lack of funding, a lack of investment, these two sides of the very same need to be united coin are pit against each other. So those are two things that I often really like to highlight.
And tell us, you mentioned this film was as much about political organizing as it was about the childcare crisis. What is the status of the movement that you started in California? You mentioned it was in litigation for a while, and you're saying it's now out of court. Where do we stand today?
So after 4.5 years, Measure C came out of the state Supreme Court. It was, you asked for politics, so it was attacked by the anti-tax group. And, you know, they took this all the way to the end, and it was very, they were very public about making an example of this measure because it was a large countywide measure. And now we are in the implementation phase. We organized, and so community organizing is a critical tool. We utilize that to levy the taxes, which went into an escrow account for the 4.5 years. And so we now have a fund of $500 million starting out. Thank you. Community governance is really, really important because the way that we built the initiative is that there's a community advisory council. So nothing could happen. No one could get their fingers on any bit of that money before parents and providers were at the table making decisions and seated in that council. And then finally, other counties throughout, we have 58 counties in California. I know Connecticut is a little bit different. Okay, I'm hearing about, I'm a municipal government nerd and you are making my head spin. But we have two similar initiatives, one regional going to the ballot in 2026, one just passed in Sonoma County this election cycle, so it's spreading. And then finally, we have a state vision bill that we're working on, and that's top secret.
Francheska, you're on the front lines as a provider here in Connecticut, and when we're watching the film, I'm sure there were moments when you wanted to reach into the screen and say, I totally understand that. Tell us, what were those moments that really resonated with you in the film? What rings true here in Connecticut? And you can't say the whole thing. I want specific moments.
So there was the moment where up in front and they didn't give it to you. I forget what moment was that you were going to ask and they kind of said that you didn't have. You needed more. If you got the signatures, then they would then pass it. Remember? That moment right there. I know you remember. I know you remember. It was that moment right there that kind of it hurt my heart. And knowing that sometimes we ask for stuff in Connecticut, right? And it doesn't pass, right? Or it doesn't happen. And having to build yourself back up and do it again. And tell other people to get back up and do it again. And have to motivate them to do it because they don't think, they just like, again, we're doing this again, that type of thing. And it just gave me motivation. Then maybe another 8 years, right? we could something. Get to 7 million? I don't know. So yes. Another 2 years? Another 2 more years? You think? She said it took me 10 years. It was 10 years. Really? Yeah. Okay. You gave it.
All right, Corey. There's a saying in Washington, D.C. political journalism that in the House of Representatives, there's really 3 parties. There's Republicans, there's Democrats, and there's appropriators. Yeah. You are the vice chair of the Appropriations Committee of one of the 2 money committees in the legislature.
For now, which I regret.
Well, give this a little bit. If the speaker's tuning into this, we'll see how he feels at the end of this. In all seriousness, though, you're headed into a legislative session next year. We know that the big debate over that session is going to be the levels of state funding within and around the fiscal guardrails, the sort of forced savings plan that the state placed itself on in 2017. I can imagine that some of these childcare priorities will run straight up against those guardrails. Talk about that and how you plan to navigate that as one of the leaders of this.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think first and foremost, I have visited California as a national fellow in the Hunt Institute's program for basically a rising leaders program and for ECE. And we went to the San Francisco area, and it was really interesting to see that there were child care providers who were provided with housing in addition to compensation, and that their kids were also provided with care at any site that best suited them. And I think that you know, not only solves the housing crisis, but it also fills a gap, primarily in terms of where we see those who are hurt the most or affected the most being served. Two things on that, Mike, when we talk about the budget for next year. And I just want to be, you know, completely transparent, although I regret doing that with Clarissa earlier when telling her that I fell asleep. And my colleague, and I think everyone should just give a round of applause to my colleague, Robin Comey, who is on the front lines of childcare all the time. You know, if you hear any expletives in that hallway, it's because we're both cursing about childcare not being taken care of. But I truly believe that when we're talking about the guardrails, which is really protecting our fiscal responsibility in the state. Look, that's great. But you can tell a lot about a state, you can tell a lot about its society with how what their attitudes and their behaviors are towards women and children. And Connecticut is failing its women and it's failing its children. And I truly believe that it was 98% of men who were childcare providers in the state and 2% of 98, yeah, and 2% of women, this wouldn't even be an issue. And so what does that say about us? It says that we have all of this work done on the budget, and we're perfectly fine to talk about fixing the guardrails to fund basketball teams and to fund, you know, university programs that have endowments that are nearly $1 billion, when we fund less than $500 million for the ECE movement in our state. And that's literally, and I say this all the time, that's literally 10% of the 90% of the brain that we're not funding at full capacity. So if we change anything with the budget constraints that we have right now with our guardrails, it has to be putting women and children first. This is our Titanic moment. And if we don't fix it now, Connecticut will be set back another 50 years because we will further more so not enable women to be able to return to the workforce, not pay our child care providers what they rightfully deserve to be paid, more than dog walkers is what they deserve, and making sure that our children are best prepared to go into K-12 system, best developed, best prepared, and emotionally and socially acclimated the best way possible, because we made that investment on the front end. And when we do that, Connecticut will continue to rise to the top and not stay at the bottom, where we have West Virginia and Florida beating us when it comes to ECE.
Clarissa, I wonder your thoughts on that. You obviously have someone who sees the world very similarly to you. For the folks in this room who might find themselves in rooms with people who don't necessarily see the issues like Corey does, and I could stand in for one of them right now and say they believe, the advocates for not changing those guardrails, that keeping them in place, continuing to pay down debt and fill up the rainy day fund is setting the state up for better fiscal health in the future. How do those conversations play out when you find someone who's not quite as enthusiastic as Corey is?
Well, clearly you have an incredible champion here. And I want to say we would not have passed Measure C without champions who get it, who understand the value of the labor and the importance, not just of the brain development, but, you know, the contribution to society as a whole. You know, a lot of people want to center on the economics of early education and, you know, cite the, you know, for every $7 spent. And that's not untrue, but that's not also what our values are, which is that every child deserves quality education. And so I also want to say people believe that California is this like really liberal, like coastal. I mean, you know, if I can be real here and be very frank, which I don't know how else to be, is that one, in this last election, what we learned is that, you know, state-sanctioned slavery was upheld in California. First of all, free labor, free prison labor, that was upheld in California. Protections for renters were struck down. And we had a nearly $200 billion surplus in the state of California, which people know is like its own country and large economy. And we have massive rainy day funds and reserves. Many counties have massive rainy day funds and reserves. And I'm going to tell you, it's raining right now. It's never not been raining. And the rainy day never seems to happen unless we need to bail out a corporation like PG&E, whose malfeasance and negligence wiped out entire cities. And I'm gonna say this because we have to, especially in this moment, talk about the way the inequities because of the ways that corporations, and you mentioned the university, which, thank you, it takes a lot of courage to name that kind of inequity when we are subsidizing corporations that can often harm communities and not investing and saying there isn't enough, the pie is not big enough. We need champions who understand the financing in public good for public goods to keep childcare a public good, and understand not just the value, not just the economics, but understand how critical it is to have strong champions. And the guardrail, you know, how do we counter that message of it's not enough, we need a rainy day? Again, that rainy day never happens. I don't know if you experience this in Connecticut, but we've lost about 1/3 of our childcare businesses in Alameda County.
Yeah.
The closures are happening now. People are going out of business, and these, you know, this is a linchpin of our community. So, you know, I could go on and on. There's an economic conversation here, but ultimately, if people aren't persuaded by the fact that children deserve to learn how to read, you know, we have to just out organize them and build our power and get them out of their seats. So.
Francheska, you're nodding along when you heard about the childcare businesses going out of business. Talk about that.
So, and it is happening. A lot of people are going out of business. They're closing, and not just because they want to close, they're forced to close. Our biggest bill that I have is my my payroll, and I keep asking for a subsidy for wages. Not only do we need a subsidy to lower for parents to be able to pay and be affordable, but we also need a subsidy for wages so that we could hire, because our hiring right now, it's not at its best. And we have to do more to get who we're hiring to be where we want them to be, or where we need them to be, or what the state requires us for them to be at. And we're coming out of, that comes from my pockets. Well, not my pockets, the business, but you know, the parents are paying, and now I'm taking from there to do this, and you know, pay Peter to pay Paul, and it's just a certain, and a lot of people do end up closing because they can't. So you either have to really be passionate about it, love it, and like what you said, what I want is that kids get that foundation before they go into kindergarten. That's what's important to me, and that's why I'm still doing it.
Of course.
One quick thing, just thank you for sharing that, because in the we have a coalition between parents and providers. And remember I said there's intersectionality, right? And a dynamism between the parents and the providers. The FCC's family childcare providers that we're working with, one of the biggest challenges that we are hearing, and I'm getting feedback about, is paying the assistants. And the assistants are often parents who can't afford to have their children in care. And sometimes folks may have to pay assistants under the table. They want to be able to pay, you know, all of the insurance, have health insurance, have full benefits, have the hours that they need. And then also if assistants have to take a day off, it impacts the business. This is a cycle of, honestly, a cycle of poverty that is so unjust, that is self-perpetuating, that can be interrupted quite easily. I'm not saying it's simple, right? But actually fully resourcing centers, resourcing family childcare providers, or family friend and neighbor care. People should not have to worry about being able to make payroll, and also being put in the position to either collect a family fee, right? Or to be able to underpay an assistant who's working with them.
Can jump in there for a second, because you know Mike did a good job of taking the hard line of the other side, and you asked the question, you know, you posed the idea that folks on the other side would say, well, we have to maintain fiscal responsibility. Let me tell you something to everyone in this room. A mother in my district is probably holding on to the last $200 that she has in her checking account and her savings account, just so she can start saving to get ahead. And if her child is hungry, she's not going to be worrying about fiscal responsibility. She's going to be a parent to make sure that her child is put first, even if she has to go without. And as a state, we need to be parents to put our children and families first, even if we have to go without. There is more money on the back end when we start putting more into children and families. That money, that return on investment is going to come back tenfold to us in ways that other states have been able to see it done. So I think that we have to stop this whole, when we've talked about this postmortem over the election a couple weeks ago, the thing that irritates me the most is hearing, and I will say it, I may get in trouble, but hearing liberal white men tell me and other members of the Democratic Party that we're not doing enough to talk about the issues that matter most to working families. It is a lie. We allow ourselves to be defined. We allowed ourselves to be said and told who we are and what we feel. And then Democrats say, oh my God, you're right. We are weak. Oh my God, we don't care about the poor. Oh my God, we are the elite. And then we go and start talking about ourselves when they start to dismantle the very programs like Head Start, like ECE, that's going to keep this country going. And it irritates me because over the last 4 years, we have had the greatest advocates for ECE in our federal government. We've had them in our state government. We need to get them more on the local level. You all have done that work. So I'm just saying, it is so important for us to wake up and stop getting off track. We can spend the money on this. We should spend the money on this. And Connecticut will be better off 50 years from now when we do spend the money on this.
So you open the door to this, Corey. You mentioned liberal white men who say that the Democrats are not focused on working families enough. I think I might know what you're talking about because I was in that press conference when Governor Lamont said that.
I didn't say it was him. I didn't say it was him. There are many. It's Connecticut. There are many liberal white men in Connecticut.
I wonder, in all seriousness, what you believe he needs to be doing on this, because so much of this is going to come down where him and his administration stand on this issue of the fiscal guardrails. If they negotiate a budget that doesn't touch the guardrails, there are many members of your party, your caucus, that will back him on that, along with, of course, all the Republicans. So what does he need to know about this?
Well, I think it's important to know that there is a difference. And I don't think that, look, this is not a sentiment. That was a gotcha moment, Mike. That was good.
I will say, I asked him that question that elicited that answer from him.
Yeah, this is not a sentiment against Governor Lamont or Senator Murphy or Congressman Himes or any of the people who we proudly vote for and represent us. That is not against them. This is a wake-up moment for us to say, it is not that we are outnumbered, we're out-organized. Malcolm X has said that many years ago. The Republicans and the conservative movement have out-organized us, not only on the federal level, not across the country, but in the state too. So for us, many of the policies that we care about with ECE go straight through the Education Committee. They get lost in the Education Committee because we're so focused on ECS, we're so focused on charter schools or other things, that we're not focused on how we're going to actually spend $16 million to feed kids at school so that it helps their learning ability, or take the Blue Ribbon Panel plan that the governor and his administration so valiantly has been able, you're going to make me laugh, has been able to get passed, and we're trying to implement. We can't piecemeal this. It needs to be done parallel to the work that we need to do in terms of funding it. So I think the governor's on the right track by even having a plan, but we need to move quicker on that plan. And we need to know that children and families have said already what it is that we need to do. We don't need to go search anymore.
Just of course, anything to add there?
Just I really appreciate you framing it as being out organized. I just keep banging the drum of this comes down to continuing to invest in and build people power. Organizing gets the goods. It is an incredible tool if we are strategic, if we are thoughtful, and most of all, if we talk to the people and inspire the hearts and minds and and the imagination of the people. So I won't comment on party politics, but I will say that I really appreciate you saying being out and who is out organized, right? And who is not courageous enough. It's us that needs to push people a little bit further to a specific side, is the community, and that the organizing needs to start at the leadership development really starts at the local level, and that's what I'm hoping the film demonstrates, is that where we identify leaders, the leaders I see in this space here today in the audience, is at the local level. And so I would also just ask, what does organizing on the ground look like? What does building coalitions with unions and community-based organizations look like? How are we engaging direct service providers to also advocate, not just to keep their organizations and their CBOs in business administratively, but also how can we redesign and reimagine a childcare system that works for everyone? And so that's really what I've been going across the country talking about in terms of how we build a groundswell of support, not just for ECE, but for working families and working class people.
Francheska, what does that organizing look like in your community?
I'm from Stanford, right? Lower Fairfield County. And I like part of the movie that you were coming out from the courthouse and someone said, "Oh, you're driving us in a good direction." And you said, "A direction." I don't know if it's good, but a direction, right? That stayed with me, and it showed me that in Stanford we do need more. And I said it. I don't want to bring it to Stanford. I'm hoping that it happens, right? I keep talking about it. We need more stuff in Lower Fairfield County, Stanford area, where we could put together ECE, childcare owners, daycare providers, and speak on what we need. Because there was a friend. She said to me, "Oh, I'm sorry." So anyway, I was somewhere, and I'm always going to every meeting in Stanford, right? And they're like, "Oh, there goes that lady. She wants more childcare money." That's what they call me, right? So I was talking to her, and I know her from when I was little. I grew up in Stanford, and she says to me, "You know the reason why it's not important to them? Because you're not making it important to them."
Yeah.
So if I don't make it important to them, they're not going to think it's important. And that's why Stanford doesn't have what?
Anything.
Or what?
Anything.
A line item.
I'm not.
Yeah. You don't
I don't want that on camera.
Well, Stanford does not have a ECE line item on their budget. And
I want to pick up on that. It sounds maybe a little bit wonky, but one of the things I found most interesting about the film, looking at it through the lens of a political journalist, was actually the whole format and medium in which you were advocating, which was for a ballot measure. We are not necessarily familiar with that here in Connecticut, to separate out almost like a line item, to have a tax measure on the ballot to show, I believe it was a 0.5% increase in the sales tax that would go into an account for childcare. I wonder, as you've been around the country, has that been something you've encountered, where actually the systems and the structures that are set up in each individual state determine what the advocacy looks like?
That's a really good question. I mean, it's so different in every state. So I'll just use Connecticut as an example. So you're saying because we don't even have necessarily a dedicated revenue source in Alameda County. We fought for that. There isn't a child care or ECE department. San Francisco has one. And our state has split childcare into two departments, disastrous results. There's a Department of Education and California Department of Social Services. So this is childcare education, or is it a social service, is still a conversation. Why? but everywhere I go, I mean, I think it depends on the local laws, so it depends on where the revenue is coming from. We chose the sales tax route because in the county, the cities make determinations on, other types of revenue. Really, the county can only levy sales tax countywide. And without getting too wonky, like I said, every state is different. So in Connecticut, you all have many city governments, right? So there's
169.
yes. And so it looks like the state is administering funding, and then like anywhere else, you have state, you have federal funding, and then the way that we're set up, the local dollars is funding that we're leveraging as last resort, right? We want to leverage every state dollar, every federal dollar. And we have something called First Five of Alameda County, and these are sort of quasi-governmental organizations, because there's no department, and it's not in social services. No one wants it to get swallowed up there. So there is an administrator to hold the money, and we don't want the state to do it, because again, by the time those dollars get to the community, it would have been administered 8, 10, 12 times. So it really just depends. It depends on the type of revenue, what the tax laws are, if that's the revenue source, and also how municipal governments receive money, and if there is a specific department. I'll say one more example. New Mexico, which just won a constitutional amendment, amazing. That was community organizing. They just had a massive win. One of the things that they're doing, and I think Minnesota as well, is looking at a specific department. So again, that they have more input on budgetary allocation and seeing sort of how the money is administered. But that's something that a lot of states are having to fight for. And in many places, county level, one thing that ARPA has taught us, the American Plan Rescue Act, is that county funding is there's a lack of transparency in the way counties administer money. The state is often really difficult for people to navigate, and then federal dollars, forget about it unless you're Head Start. And so a lot of folks are organizing for state departments dedicated to ECE. That's not a panacea. And then we have to figure out how to unpack 169 villages or municipal governments, or unpack how county passes their money. Sorry, that was a very long, weird answer, but there's no easy way to talk about that. And also because I'm going to say something that everybody knows, childcare funding is incredibly fractured, right? Because you just mentioned it, Representative Paris, we've had to piecemeal together funding. So I don't know. I think we need strong leadership like yours, and also creative solutions from the community to say, look, we don't want to have to go and knock on every single legislator's door in 169 different cities to have either state level or local level funding. But if we have to, we will.
We will.
Corey, help bring this home for us. What are those levers that folks? I'm sorry, did you want to continue? Okay. Corey, what are the policy levers that you can pull in the next legislative session?
To me, it's just, I'm not some raging liberal. I feel like I saw that, Mike. I'm not. I just think that when issues just make sense, they should just make sense, and we should just move forward with them. And so when we talk about those policy levers and what we can do next year, knowing that likely we're not going to raise taxes, knowing likely we're not probably going to spend around the guardrails or change the fiscal guardrails, there are going to likely be cuts probably to really important programs across our state. And it also, I think, depends heavily on what happens with the federal program, with the federal government. We are the last line of defense in this state to protect child care for all people. Now, I envision this in two ways. what's the reality right now. I see a woman in my district. She's a single mom. She holds a master's degree. She's got a great job, probably making more money than her parents had ever made, well over $100,000, which, believe it or not, Time Magazine says that 48% of people who make over $120,000 are living paycheck to paycheck. So let's dispel that rumor about that being wealthy.
Especially in Stanford.
She also holds nearly $77,000 in student loan debt, which continues to go up because of the interest. She makes minimum payments on her student loan payment, and then the servicer, because she's not making a full payment every month, will sell her loan to a new servicer, and it changes the terms of her loan. So her payment either goes up or the interest grows. She has a son who has special needs. She had a complicated pregnancy. She's still trying to pay her car, still trying to go to work, and now paying close to $2,200 in rent for a one-bedroom little loft area, one bedroom with a loft area that she's now turned into a bedroom for her son. If we had done better by focusing on prenatal to 5 and making sure that this woman had the best possible care as a mother and left the hospital knowing what program she was going to put her child in before she had to go back to work, if we had known better and had done better by making sure that we had drop-in services for parents, that we protected women who were, or I'll say victims of domestic violence, who are scared and they can't go get jobs when they're running from an abusive spouse because they don't have childcare options for their kids. If we had done better by ensuring that when we drop off our kids to programs that their teachers are not like most of the kids in the program, that they're not going to be food insecure too, this state would not have the problems that we have. So I think this year what we can do is start looking at the next steps of how we further implement the Blue Ribbon Panel plan. I think we also look at making sure that we are focusing on prenatal care through the OEC and through the legislature and making that a priority to protect women and to save women. And above all else, we have to make sure that infant and toddler care is taken care of and well-funded in our state, but we're also fixing the issue in our deserts, finding money through WBDC, through federal grants, through state grants to enable more providers to open up programs across the state and in the deserts that we see. Because wherever we have deserts in our state and we don't have childcare available, the economy suffers far greater than anywhere else in our state. So we want to talk about how great our economy should be. It starts with children, it ends with children, it moves with children, and it will sustain with children.
I just want to make the call one more time. If there's any audience questions, you have the QR codes on the programs that you could submit on, which I will see on my phone up here. And I'm going to check and see. So someone says, Corey, I think this might be directed at you. This says the Blue Ribbon Panel is a great start, but it doesn't provide the transformation that is needed for all people in Connecticut to thrive. How do we get lawmakers to understand that this is a major infrastructure issue and needs attention?
Yeah, it is a good start. And again, I commend the governor and his staff and Commissioner Bai on working with national experts on this. And I think it's great to have business leaders, but I think if we're going to talk about who we need to be listening to, we need to be listening to parents and providers more. And I think that there is an absence in this plan with understanding as to what parents and providers need. I worked in a program for 5 years. Okay, I started working at this program. I didn't think I was going to like it. And something got me one day. There was a child who was crying profusely. And he thought I was his dad because I was tall like his dad. I had similar hair. I was wearing a suit. His dad would wear a suit to work. And he would not stop crying until I picked him up and I had to put him to sleep. And that's when I realized it is just because I don't have children at this time, or just because I'm a man in this field, does not mean that I have any less value than those who are in this field. In fact, it is the responsibility is upon me to ensure that we are uplifting our children and our women so that they can get the resources that they need to make sure that they're doing what they need to do in this field. So the plan is not as robust as we would like. I think we just need early childhood education that's universal across the state. We need to start working with our health systems and making sure that we have doctors who are providing maternal care plans to parents, and then showing them the best programs early on. So while the child is still in the mother's womb, that they have a plan when they come out. And above all else, I think we need to stop being afraid of putting money where our best investment has always been. And that's
there's a question here about the fiscal guardrails. I think we've discussed that. There's another question that says, what can state and local governments do to make it easier to advocate? I wonder if Clarissa and Francheska might have some thoughts there.
To make it easier to advocate. No, that's true. I used to joke that the County Office of Administration should give me an office there. Because I went there and I was, I think it is our civic duty, responsibility, to show up, to organize, and to continue to apply pressure. And when we have a champion, we have someone, whether they're a champion or not, to ensure that parents and providers have a very clear, that our vision is heard. And I guess, I don't want to say it's the role of elected officials to open the door, because honestly, we should be knocking them down. We should really, our county and our state was not friendly to the organization. We would show up to public hearings and they would change the supervisors would change the agenda around. And so we would be there for hours. I remember one specific story where, I don't think it's in the film, but we were sitting there, and this is a group of mothers and their children are actually there. Some of them are nursing mothers. They have to pick kids up from school. We had been at a, hearing, fighting for emergency childcare vouchers for families experiencing houselessness. And we had been sitting there for at least 3 hours in the middle of the afternoon around pickup time. And they kept moving the item, which was public comment. We couldn't even get an item on the agenda at that point. And they kept moving the item, moving the item, moving the item. And I remember, as an organizer, my heart was, because people were looking at me to make a decision. Do we fall back or do we stay there and hold? And the fact that we sat there for 4.5 hours, nursing babies, children on the floor, children crying, and the tension for me was, do I ask my community, these moms who are already going through it and might be missing wages right now to be here, who are maybe not picking up kids, who are on the phone trying to figure out arrangements, who have given hours of their life to fight for their lives. Do I ask them to stay another hour? Or maybe this item is not heard. And so I made a decision. People are looking at me like, oh my gosh, are we leaving? Are we going? Like, what is? And I said, let's just stay. Let's stay. And it says something when and it's unfortunate that we have to do this, but it says something when you are unwilling to be moved. When you stay and you're not leaving, and they see you, and you go through extraordinary lengths, no matter how many times they move an item on an agenda or whatever parliamentary tricks get played. We're gonna sit here with our babies, and then we're gonna do it again the next week. And then we're gonna do it again the next week. So if they don't make or create pathways, we create our own. And you keep showing up and keep showing up.
So I've got another one for you coming from the audience. It says that you've really emphasized and built parent support for this movement. How can advocates activate and engage parents in a long-term battle when early childhood is a relatively short period of time and their personal investment wanes after their children are out of daycare?
This is always the question. This is always the question. And I think this is why a lot of people this is why I say parents and providers have to work together, and why people tend to gravitate towards providers. There's a concrete wage and benefits relationship to the work that's going to be ongoing. And many of our providers are in the field 20, 30 years, giving their heart to this work. What we have found is that when the organizing is good and people feel powerful and their leadership is there, they stick and they keep organizing. They organize in the K through 12 system. Then they organize to not have those not have loans. You know, they organize for their children to be able to, you know, navigate college system. Organizing is a skill that is transferable into any aspect of our lives. It is transferable into the workplace. It is transferable even all the way up to the White House, I believe. Because right now, you know, I'm not gonna say what you think I'm gonna say. Right now, we need people who are in institutions, who are in government, who believe in good government to stay there and organize, right? In you know, as civil service workers. So one would think that as our kids get older, the self-interest wanes, but if we are practitioners of engaging folks around transforming their lives through developing their own leadership, then the practice carries them through well beyond their children's young years.
Another audience question, and I want to direct it towards Francheska. It says, what is it that you think lawmakers are not understanding about childcare and its impact on our families and our economy? And what is the most important message to get across to change minds and educate? What doesn't Corey Paris understand?
She shows up to my house.
Oh. So one thing that I believe that we need to do as providers regarding childcare and the parents, the staff, is to educate, right? It's educating them on what we're doing and having people that, like you said, at the table, that are doing this work. A lot of people that right now are at the table or part of these boards are older people, they're males, and they probably had nothing to do with childcare or had nothing to do because their wife probably did it, right? And they're the ones making those decisions for us. So I would say that we educate them, right? And like you said, a lot of what you're saying to me is that we need to be persistent. We need to be resilient. We need to have consistency. And things that I've said to other people, it can't just be one voice. It's been told to me. It has to be multiple voices, right? So that we are better together, right? To get this point across. And it's not even about, it's not even about the money, like you said. It's not. Because, yeah, it takes money to do certain things, but it's just to get people together, doing one cause to move one thing. Like, let's get something passed, right? And like just recently, we passed the ratio, right, for censors, and I felt so excited when that happened, right? Because we kept going back and forth. Were we gonna get it? And finally it passed, and now we're 1 to 5 with 2-year-olds. But it's those little things that give me hope to keep going.
Congratulations. Yeah. Yeah, we should clap for that. We should clap for that. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Mm-hmm. One quick thing about when you said it's just we need multiple people. I mean, not everybody can be there in the middle of the day when these meetings are happening. So these meetings need to be accessible to the community. And I'm sorry, it is unacceptable. It is unacceptable that it is mostly men making these decisions. And I think we're seeing this play out, and that is transform. And again, there's I don't want to say a translator, but someone who can say, oh, we need to center women, we need to center children. And really quickly, just about, you know, the one person thing, I would show up to these county meetings that I wasn't actually supposed to be at. They're public, but not a lot of, you know, they weren't publicized. I hear from word of mouth. And I used to feel really like I was out of my mind because I was, you know, here I was a parent. I wasn't a policy professional. I didn't look, sound, or carry myself as someone who knew the ins and outs of the childcare delivery system. I didn't say all the right words, but what I did say every single time, probably about 300 times, and even if I was the only one, you know, I would say, hello, my name is Clarissa Doutherd. I'm here to talk about the waiting list. There are 12,000 children on the waiting list right now. These are Black and brown children on the waiting list, and I want to have some answers. To where, you know, when they saw me coming into a meeting, people would be like, and then when I said, well, and it's right, I know I'm not alone in that. And that is actually a good sign, believe it or not. If they see you come in, they're like, and as soon as I said the word waiting list, people will be like, when, you know, almost like there's a bingo card or something. Okay, she's gonna say 12,000. But eventually it got to a point towards the end of Measure C where we had a congresswoman saying 12,000, then 15,000 families. And so we are never in the wrong place. Those spaces belong to us. And then you go over and we go and we take over those spaces. The more that we are authentically in ownership and agency in those spaces, because our personal lived experiences is so valuable and must inform policymaking.
There's an audience question here that I actually want to ask. Part of it I was planning on asking you. The first part of the question is, they want to know what the first or most important thing we should do to build our coalition is. And the second part, which I was going to ask, whoever asked this, thank you for putting it out there. How's your son doing? And did you ever get to go to Mexico?
Yeah, I definitely went to Mexico. I went to Mexico a couple times. I'm going back to Mexico soon. So building powerful coalitions is just like organizing or anything else, is an art and also a commitment, right? For us to, like you said, unify and come together. Listen, coalitions are complicated. I'm in a weird place. So I just, you know, you have some seemingly competing interests and hundreds of years of history of institutions and systems not being created for the benefit of women and children, for the benefit of people of color, for the benefit of working class people. And so all of those different dynamics come, but I would say that it is critically important, again, I think I said this earlier, to identify the interest of the direct service providers, because there's a lot of insight that, I don't know if do you have resource and referral agencies here or in every city? I'm not in every city. Does the state? Is state, okay. So do you contract out with community-based organizations, or is it only state run? Okay. So that's one thing. I mean, that's even a piece of infrastructure to, you know, because you have to have folks who understand sort of the back end administration and are also interested in supporting not just the funding of that administration, but how to administer it well with the insight of community, right? So the people who do the provide payments, and I hope this translates, the payments to providers need to be aware of the experience providers have, or the people who are funding, administering contracts with centers, state contracts with centers have to be. So all of these, what I'm saying is collaborating with systems actually is really important. And something that we found to be really effective, not just the elected officials, but the people who understand some of the ins and outs of the regulations. And then I think the most critical piece is, again, organized labor. I see there's some union members here. We love labor, we love unions. And there's a lot of different political dynamics that play out, but that is people's power, that an organization that we always want to participate, partner with, and leverage any and everywhere we can, especially in today's political climate. So I'm happy to answer any other specific questions about coalition building, but I think the essential ingredients is, again, some systems knowledge and administrative understanding, organized labor, and then, of course, parents, which can be difficult, and having really clear agreements about what your coalition, what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, how long you'll work together, and what's the mechanism you don't want to just be in meetings for meetings, right? I think one thing none of us need is another meeting, right? But like, we definitely don't need that. We have a lot going on. One thing we don't need is another focus group, right? We don't need another listening session. These are important tools. Though these are important tools. Don't do it for free. If you're gonna do it, don't do it for free. I'm just say that. You know what I mean? Like, don't do it for free. If people want your expertise, they should fund the coalition, right? So there's also a resource question, but I would say have some kind of North Star, whether that's a ballot initiative, maybe it's a state piece of legislation, or changing a regulation like ratios. That's critical. You know what I mean? So something that people can really come together around, I think, is one of the most important pieces.
I want to close out, Corey and Francheska, on that note of things that can be done. Are there any sort of innovative solutions, anything that you are excited about working on in the next year or so? Obviously, we know the overall investment you would be in favor of increasing, but are there any specific things in the vein of what Clarissa just mentioned that get you excited?
Well, next year is a budget year, right? I heard. And I've been planting my seed in Stanford so that hopefully we could get a line item for ECE, dedicated just to ECE, not tied to the Board of Education or K-12. So I'm excited to hope, I'm hoping. I'm excited for that.
Corey?
Yeah, first and foremost, I just want to say that the reason why I care so much about this issue came up because of both of my grandmothers. My maternal grandmother was basically told by my grandfather, "You're going to stay at home and take care of our daughter." And my grandmother says to this day, she was so sick of seeing her daughter and she couldn't go out and do anything. She was not enabled to lean into her feminism and then also lean into who she was as an independent person. My paternal grandmother worked at a factory and had 3 kids at home and had to basically teach them how to fend for themselves while being both mom and dad. And I think of all the missed opportunities and the missed talent that they hold that they weren't able to explore because of the barrier of childcare not being provided to them. Now we live in a world where everyone just thinks it's daycare, and it's not. This is a real living, breathing, learning system. And we once again are failing to unleash a tremendous amount of talent, not just with women, not just with children, but dads too. But it's easier for them to navigate that, but also for dads. So I say this to say, this is a no bars hold here. I think we just rip the Band-Aid off and we basically expose that we don't have enough time to allow for this crisis to continue to persist and manifest in the way that it is. And if we don't make childcare a priority, either putting it through a specific committee, either ensuring that each and every one of you take the names of every single legislator, because again, we talked about what Malcolm X said, we are not outnumbered, we are out-organized. Organize. And you all are the next, no one's gonna fight against moms and providers, parents and providers. Endorse who you want to endorse. Walk and knock against the people that don't support your interests. It is by any means necessary in this state that we get childcare to be universal, accessible, and affordable. And there can be no compromise on that now or ever. And so it is up to you for us to empower you through policy, but you all need to empower the people that we are electing to understand the struggles and to understand the plight of what's going to happen if we do not fix this. Our economy fails. We want to talk to finance folks, our economy fails and childcare fails. We want to talk to parents, your kids are not going to be able to succeed if we don't have childcare. So right now is the time to understand that for white folks, for Black folks, for parents, for people who don't have kids, for rural areas, suburban areas, urban areas, a rising tide lifts all boats, and childcare will lift this state towards our future.
With that, I think we're going to conclude our. Paris, thank you. Thank you, Friends Center for Children, Child Care for CT, everyone. And I think he was you're gonna close it out. All right. Thank you, everyone.
To what Mike said. So yes, thank you to everyone who's here. Just a reminder that we have some extra food outside on the table. We also have a lot of, we're in the beginning of a logo change. So this is our brand new logo debut. You guys get the first look of it. We have a lot of materials, t-shirts from our past logo. You can still use them, you can still rep, but we're giving away, it's free obviously, it's on the piano, so grab as many as you like. We also have literature about our coalition, so if you have interactions with your community, church, faith community, your own childcare spaces, and you want to distribute that literature about what the coalition is trying to build, how to get people involved, please grab a stack, as many as you like. And then again, another thank you to Alex Schiavone, the Friends Center, for just being such a wonderful host, all of you who are here. And don't forget that legislative session is around the corner, January 8th, you know, it's coming up really, really close. And this is the moment right now to start talking to your legislators, making sure that we are engaged, that we do have a voice. These conversations like tonight really kick off that session and get us motivated so we're ready to share our stories. Thank you, everyone.